Hi, so in this video I'm going to be telling you all about my pathway to longevity step by step. Hi, my name is Christine O'Connor. Welcome to Happy Stuff and Fluff, a channel for women over 50 who are getting happy and growing younger. Okay, so this is part 2 in a series about reversing aging. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll leave the link here. Now, before I start on my on the decisions I've made about what I'm going to do going forward in terms of my own physical well-being and growing younger and living longer, there's just a few caveats to that video and some of the comments that I've received since then. First of all, I always tell you, I love receiving your emails, and I think you feel you can say a lot more in your emails than you do in the comments below, and that's great. But you can leave long comments below, and I'd really like you to leave comments below because it helps with the YouTube algorithm. Now, I don't know how it works, but the more interaction or the more comments you leave or thumbs up you give and so on, the more the video spreads far and wide, which is of course what I want it to do. So so please continue to email me, but also leave comments down below. That would help greatly. And it would also help me if you would please share this video on Facebook with your friends, and the last one, so that people can watch this series too. Because in reality, although my audience is for women over 50, of course, this is for everyone. To a certain extent. But just talking about that, my audience is for women over 50. Now, I know I have quite a few young women on here, which is why I'm going to tell younger than 50 anyway. Now, I know this is a blanket statement, but I'm assuming none of you women over 50 are going to get pregnant anytime soon. Please let me know if you do. But for you younger girls, when I'm talking about diet, which I will be doing in a second, it's not really for you. I'll explain later. Anyway, whenever you're going to change your diet, whoever you are, however old you are, it's always wise to mention it to your GP, but we'll talk about that in a second. The other thing is, one or two of you who had seen the work of this chap, where all this information has come from, David Sinclair, you mentioned to me that as well as the supplements that I talked about in the last video, he's also taking something called metformin. Now, I knew that, and I didn't mention it because we can't get it. We can't get metformin in this country. And I'll just tell you a little story about it. So David Sinclair takes metformin, which is a prescribable drug given to people with diabetes. Now, David Sinclair does not have diabetes. And when I read that, I thought, whoa, that's a little bit too radical for me to do that, to take a drug for something when he doesn't have it. He takes it because he says it helps to prevent cancer, heart disease, and all of these diseases of aging. Now, oddly enough, when I was reading that, and I thought, no, that's not something I could do, on our nightly news in the UK, they were talking about metformin. And they were saying that this is a drug that's usually given to people with diabetes, is now being given to people with multiple sclerosis because it helps them too. So this is clearly a drug we need to keep our eyes on. Even so, especially in the UK, I doubt very much, guys, if you went to your GP in the UK and said, please prescribe me some metformin, and no, I don't have diabetes, I think you'd get short shrift, and you certainly wouldn't be prescribed it on the NHS unless you've got a real on it kind of GP. I somehow doubt it. So that's the reason I didn't mention metformin. We do need to watch it, and I'm sure the medical profession are, obviously. So that's that. Those are those couple of things I wanted to say before I continue. Or the other thing was, some of you, I think, did not watch the video to the very end. I don't know why. Very often it's the juicy bits that come at the end, because some of you, I think, thought I was just talking about diet and exercise, which I mentioned before I got to the supplement bit. So if you didn't watch it to the end, go back and watch it to the end where I talk about the supplements. Okay, so this is all about growing younger, and David Sinclair wrote this book, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. He's a scientist. I talk about all of this in the video. Please watch that if you haven't watched it, because it would make all of this make much more sense. So I want to talk to you about what I've decided to do after reading his book, after researching into his work, some of the things I've decided to do. And as I said to you in the last video, why I find this exciting is because we can do this. We can put this into place now. We don't have to wait decades. You know, it's not one of these things, we've found a drug for this, but it won't reach the market until, 30 years down the line. These are things that we can do now. I am going to start with dieting because, according to Sinclair, eating less is top of the list. If he gives advice to someone, what can we do right now that's going to help us to live longer? He says eating less. Research it. Do your own research on this. I've done mine. And as you know, I started time-restricted eating. I'll leave the video here again, where I think it's called the 1816 type of fasting. Sorry, start that again. 16:8. Where you don't eat for 16 hours, and then everything you do you eat within an 8-hour window. Michael Mosley from the BBC, I think, brought that to our attention in the UK, certainly. So that 16 hours, of course, includes your nighttime sleeping, which is what makes it easier to do. So let's say I will get up, I got up in the morning, I would not eat breakfast until 11 o'clock. And then I'd have lunch whenever it fit in, but I would make sure that my final meal was at 6:30 or before, fitting it all into that 8-hour window, and then not eating again at all that night, and then not again until the following day, 11 o'clock. So I found that quite easy to do, and enjoyable, actually. I enjoyed that way of eating. Of course, I couldn't do that every day. Some days we might go out to dinner and not eat till 8:30 or 9 o'clock. Hey, it doesn't matter. We're not talking about a diet here. We're talking about a way of life, and it has to fit in with your way of life, and you must not be dead rigid about it. That's what I would say if you're going to start on that regime. Now, I did that for quite some time. As many of you know, I'd been caring for my daughter Charlotte, who was terminally ill and living here with us. And her diet, of course, was very complicated, and we had a biochemist come in to advise us on that. And lots of the good stuff that he talked about for Charlotte was also good for us too. So I was eating very healthily as well. And I think, well, I know because my GP said to me, when I told you that I remained healthy all the way through looking after Charlotte, which surprised me. And then after the Charlotte show, her funeral service, the very day after, I was knocked out with something that floored me for a couple of days. My GP thinks that if I hadn't been healthy beforehand, that episode would have lasted a lot longer. So that was kind of good to hear. So I was eating healthily and doing this time-restricted eating. However, towards the end, Charlotte got to a point where she couldn't eat at all. She might eat something like watermelon. She drank lots of water, but she didn't eat. And so neither did I. In a kind of, solidarity thing, I would find myself going all day and not eating anything. And then perhaps if someone else came in to be with Charlotte, Mr. Kitchen, and I would go out for dinner, and then I would eat a normal meal. So I found that easy to do, relatively easy to do. And so now, since Charlotte passed away, and we went away for a week and kicked off our healthy regime, I find it's even more important to me that I find a regime that I'm comfortable with, that is healthy. But now, of course, it's also going to make me live longer. So let's get into it. So I'm not doing the time restricted eating now in that sense. What I am doing is working my way up to what they call the 5-2, where you go 5 days eating healthily and normally, and then you go 2 days where you don't eat anything at all until, say, 6 o'clock, and then you have a meal of 500 calories only, and you do that for 2 days, not back to back. And the rest of the time you eat normally. And when I say normally, I don't mean burgers and chips, burgers and fries, which I never did anyway. It's like healthy eating, more plant food. Cut down red meat. So we're now eating red meat once a week, twice a week maximum. We're eating lots more fish. We're eating chicken and more plant-based food. And we've introduced that since what I was reading in Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. So that's my diet changed. I'm kind of working my way up to this 5-2. When I say working up, I'm doing 3 days at the moment where I don't eat anything at all until dinner, which is around 6:30, and then I have a normal meal. And I do that 3 days. I find that the best way for me, because if I'm going to do this, I feel I do have to be eating healthily, and it's very difficult to get everything you need in 500 calories. There are recipes online, where that are 500 calories that give you good stuff. But I'm doing this 3 days a week, and so that's the way I like to do it. It's good for me. Now, when I've done this for a while, I'll perhaps go on to the 500 calories, but this is suiting me at the moment. I have lost some weight, not a lot of weight, but enough to make me feel more comfortable in my clothes, which is fine by me. But I feel like I have so much more energy, and my fingernails, I don't know if you can see those, have never been so good. My eyes feel brighter. I feel healthier. So for the moment, this is what I'm sticking to. So that's the diet. 3 days, I don't eat anything at all until about 6:30, and then I eat a normal meal, which is a healthy meal for me. As I say, not burger and chips. So that's what I'm doing. Now, I have to reiterate too, this is what I'm doing. I'm not suggesting you do it. You may need all kinds of different things to me. For example, although you may not be thinking of getting pregnant anytime soon, you are possibly perimenopausal or menopausal or postmenopausal, and your body may need different hormones to mine. So you do have to check with your doctor and find a way that fits you and that suits you. One thing I would say, if you are going to do this fasting, is, and you're doing it with your partner, and your partner's male, you can't really match him time for time, because women's hunger hormone reacts differently to this than men's. So now to get over that, if some days I find it more difficult to do than others, so there might be some days where I think, gosh, I am really hungry, in which case I will eat some nuts, possibly some fruit, and break the fast, and then start again tomorrow. There are no hard and fast rules. Like I say, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's a habit that we want to get into. It has to fit in with our lifestyles, and it has to fit in with your body and your body's needs. So I'm just telling you what I'm doing and what works for me. Now, on top of that, then, the supplements that I talked about last week. So we're talking about, get this, nicotinamide mononucleotide, or NMN, to you and me, which is one of the molecules I talked about last week, as is resveratrol. Now, again, if you're doing your research and you read what David Sinclair is taking, I think he takes 1 gram of NMN and 0.5 gram of resveratrol. I'm kind of putting my toe in the water to start with, and I've started on 0.5 gram of NMN and 1/4 gram of resveratrol. I will up it. I am going to up it, but I just wanted to start on that for a couple of weeks. I also take a fish oil with vitamin D. Not out of the book. That's what we take here, particularly in the UK. Most of us need more vitamin D. And you wouldn't believe the problems it can cause you if you are lacking in vitamin D. That's something you might need to ask your GP to have a look at. So the other thing I would say is then, if you're going to take these supplements, perhaps get some blood test done to see where all your levels are, thyroid levels, hormone levels are to start with, before you start on this, and then keep checking them every now and then just to be on the safe side. Because even Sinclair says, these things that he's doing, we don't know how long we're going. Well, he says he does, but obviously we might do all these things. It doesn't mean we're going to live to be 120. We might just live to be 115. It's meant to just prolong a healthy life. This is what he's talking about. This is what he's scientifically proven to work in all the experiments that have been done, and now there are human beings taking these supplements all over the world without side effects, known side effects. So that's the other thing that kind of influenced me. So another long video, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to write that down, my regime, and I'm going to put it in this week's newsletter. I know lots of you are signed up for the newsletter. If you're not, you can do it at my website, www.christinelconroy.com, and just go over there, sign up for the newsletter, so that you've got it down, so you don't have to keep coming back to watch the video. Okay, I think that's everything there, except exercise. I haven't talked about exercise, so I'll just tell you about that briefly. According to Sinclair, the best way to do it for women of our age, exercisers of our age, is to do high intensity interval training, which is where you knock yourself out for like 90 seconds, then rest, and then start again. Now, if you are going to start something like that, certainly talk to your doctor or get yourself a trainer. I'm not doing any aerobics at the moment except for running up the apartment stairs, which I said I would do. We're talking about moving more. I started walking up. We're only 3 floors up, but it's like 6 little flights. And it just reminds me, every time I go down for the post, every time I go down and go out and come back in, I come up the stairs. Only now I've started running them. So that's a start. And this is what I'm saying. Just take something and start. And choose one thing, do your research and start doing that. Don't try and do everything all at once, because it's going to get overwhelming and you'll just give up. And I don't want you to do that, because this is really exciting stuff. And like I said last week, these scientists are not charlatans. These are renowned scientists from prestigious universities all over the world who are giving us this information and advice. What you do with it now is up to you. Please join me. I want us all to live healthily and happy till we're well over 100 and hopefully 120. And what I'm going to talk about next is what is the world going to look like if we're all living to that age. All right. Okay, again, please tell me what you think. Leave comments down below. Ask me questions. Let's get a conversation going. And I'll see you next time. And until then, remember that on the Happy Stuff and Fluff, we actually are getting happy and growing younger.